A sneak
That's
peek
not
at
how
what's coming up
learning works.
next.
Shaming is a tool of like white supremacy, and no one goes, "Oh, I've been shamed. I learned a lot."
But is that even the goal though? When people are doing those things, they're not trying to actually change people's minds,
Right.
because if
They're
you
not
were,
even
you would
trying.
approach it a different way.
It's terrible. It's truly horrible. And what I've seen in my kids who identify as boys who are autistic, we destroy so much like truly beautiful traits in them.
Right.
It's so awful to watch them realize, okay, I have to like kill all the soft, gentle, kind parts of myself to fit in. It's like it's watching a slow kind of death. It is so painful to watch. I honestly wonder if some folks who are autistic, if they've done the work of grieving who they were as kids, like the grief of looking back at who you were as a child and what got taken away from you as you kind of kept surviving and trying to navigate like a world that's not built for you, a world that is determined to misunderstand you and misrepresent you.
Right. Welcome to On the Spectrum podcast. I'm Nick.
I'm Steve.
And as usual, he's got way less energy than I do. So as I always like to say, me and Steve do not presume to be experts of anything whatsoever. We're just two human beings who are living on the spectrum and trying to learn the best we can, which is why we have tendency to interview people who don't look or live the lives we've had. And that kind of brings
No, we were thinking about canceling our show because we were told that, there's enough white guys out there making podcasts already, so we should just stop.
That's true. Even though majority of the social media people I see talking about autism are white women who I can only assume are upper middle class.
Actually, I saw somebody talking about that recently too, but it was... anyway.
So with that being said... Although that's a horrible segue. I don't know if you said it's a segue. All right. So we're interviewing somebody today. And without me saying with that being said, because I don't want to associate the two together. Anyway, we're interviewing somebody from the Ticker Tacker who has a lot of experience in spaces that are autistic and also with autistic people. They have kind of I would say a good predominant, well-opinioned voice on the TikTok space. I dig what they put out there, which is why we're having them on our show. Everybody, this is Mosh. Hi.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Was that good enough of an intro right there?
That was so good. I'm so proud of you. Yes.
Thank you so much.
We had we already had a great conversation before we started recording. So we have to hit the camera. We have to start recording so we can get some of this.
Yeah.
Other people, I think, would agree with us. I think that they would like what we have to say. So, or at least what you have to say.
Fine. They're entitled to their opinions. It's fine.
That's true.
But the stuff that you were talking about is stuff that's been on my mind recently, stuff that's been bothering me. And I posted, I don't know if you've seen any of them, but I posted a few TikToks recently complaining about how we treat each other sometimes.
He did.
Yeah, I feel like I've worked with kids as young as kinder who are autistic with all different support needs. And it's and then all the way up through high school. And I work with neurodivergent adults who are not just autistic, but often are. And it's kind of like interesting to watch it evolve, this kind of taking it out on each other thing, that it evolves very, very gradually, developmentally over time. And it's like, to me, it's very clear. And I'm not like a therapist or a clinical researcher, right? Like my background is in special education and now supporting families and neurodivergent adults and being in schools. But it's like you could see it over time, how like kids absorb the terrible things that are hard for them and then hate other disabled kids. It's very, very quick. I know some people are going to get mad that I'm saying autism is a disability. That's fine. They can disagree with that. I don't care. But like it starts pretty young. And then by the time we get into like adult spaces, whether it's an organizing space that we call quote unquote leftist, but it's like majority like white men and women who are organizing, but they're all anti-religion. And so who actually is going to organize with us? ? Or whether it's an online space where you use the word that I don't like it. And it's like, okay, can you take a deep breath and like have a conversation about it? If not, why are you yelling at me? And I mean, like we yell as a form of communication. I get that. But the keyboard warrior nonsense is like out of control.
I would admit I used to be guilty of that stuff. I have since stopped doing that because I realized when it started happening to me, or I started noticing it more on online spaces. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I shouldn't do that either. So I've been trying to control myself. I try to be a lot more measured nowadays. I try to have more patience.
It's less fun. I'm going to be honest. It's less fun. It's less dopamine. It's less serotonin to be measured. But
I mentioned to you before we started recording how like, actually I forgot what I was going to say about jumping on top of people, but about how we
metaphorically jumping on top of people, by the way.
I was like, you could do that physically with consent. That's fine.
Metaphorically.
I completely spaced. It was something I said before we recorded, but anyway, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. Sorry.
It feels weird that like you were saying you made a video about a historical figure when we're talking about the history of autism and everyone got mad. And I'm like, I feel like we're at a place in general, not just for autistics, but in general, where feelings are like the only thing that matter. Like, it doesn't matter if it's facts. It doesn't matter if it's history. It doesn't matter. People want validation more than anything. And I think that's actually why platforms like TikTok took off, is because there's a lot of information sharing, but also a lot of validation. And so anytime you come across like a video that your algorithm is like, well, maybe you should look at this perspective, or like someone is in your pocket of content, but they say something differently, you're like, no, I can't. And I'm like, I don't know anyone who's ever changed their mind from someone yelling at them, blocking them, and then making crappy, mean videos about, like, I don't know anyone who's learned that way. And maybe it's because I've been a teacher my entire career so far that like, that's not how learning works. Shaming is a tool of like white supremacy, and no one goes, oh, I've been shamed, I learned a lot.
But is that even the goal though, when people are doing those things? They're not trying to actually change people's minds, because if you were, you would approach it a different way.
No.
What do you think the goal is when they're doing
that? I think they're trying to draw attention to themselves and maybe get some sense of validation, like you're saying. I think it's like, hey, look at me. I'm it's almost like virtue signaling. Like I am so much better than you. I have the moral high ground, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
don't come at me, Anakin. I have the moral high ground.
Yeah, it's good, but it's like,
you're my Haspy brother, Anakin. I loved you.
Oh my, yeah. All I'm seeing is the rat tail right now. That's all I'm saying is the rat tail. Oh my god. Yeah.
Okay.
That was good. It feels so weird when people are like, you're an ableist, and in general, like as a rule, I feel like we need to get away from like calling people a fixed identity.
Yes.
Right.
Because it puts them on the defensive. Like if you're like, you're an ableist.
Well, it's like saying why to somebody. It automatically puts them on the defensive.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah. There's no point to it.
I was talking about before how I mentioned like that I give people more leeway now because I know that we're prone to all or nothing thinking, black and white thinking. Right.
Yeah.
And that plays into kind of what you're saying, is because we do have a tendency to do that. So if somebody says something you don't like, or you put them in a box instantly, we have a tendency of doing that. We're like, we go to the extreme.
Right. I used to call it like extreme logic, and I see it with kids.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't know if this happens with either of you, if this would resonate, but like, I'm like, I take whatever rule, because I think we don't talk enough about how much autistic brains tend to internalize rules, even if they're not like a rule that someone else told you. You create your own rule, and then you're like, this is the rule.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I work a lot on with kids and adults is like, what is the rule? We keep digging to figure out like, so like I'll give you an example, I guess. Like someone I really care about has a rule that every time they enter a room, they say hello.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know where they got that from. They don't know where they got that from. They just know like, oh, and then we got to, they're like, well, it's rude if I don't say hello. They like, that's the rule. Right. But rules can be things as inflexible, because one of the 4 key areas of autistic diagnosis is like really rigidity, right? It's like rigid behavior. So the rigid behavior becomes like, all these words are always wrong. And every time I see someone say that, I have to say something. And it's like,
and their intent doesn't matter. It just matters that you said something bad.
Right. And I think we've kind of lost a lot of nuance where we think accountability is shame. We think, and accountability is supposed to be around restoring and rehabilitating relationships and community.
Yes. And
it's like you get into these spaces online, and it's just like wading through trauma. I feel like I'm snorkeling through trauma. There's like piranhas of trauma. There's stingrays. I don't know. And like, you never know what is the thing that's going to piss someone off so bad.
No, I agree. I will say, on one hand, it's a wonderful thing, and it says a lot about a human being when they're sensitive to other people's trauma. And there's also knowing when you can speak and you don't need to worry or risk somebody else's trauma because it's on the other side of that, right? Like
I've like stopped. I've stopped. You cannot attend to everyone's.
No, you can't. That's what I was trying to get to. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at.
And I think a lot of folks, not everyone obviously, but a lot of autistic folks, part of our like survival, and I see it in kids, is people pleasing, right? Like we try to just be like, I mean, oh, man.
Guilty.
Yeah, you are very guilty. But I went the opposite direction from him. He still tries to people please, but I went the opposite direction.
I'm actually more extreme people pleasing now, to the point where that's why I try to, like I said before, where I try to walk on eggshells because I don't want to say something's going to hurt somebody. I try to watch my language, even when I say something like I didn't know that there's certain Reddit communities that don't like the word autism, and I'm like, oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I had no intention to offend anybody, but okay.
And I just figured everybody's not going to like me to begin with, so I might as well just say things whatever way I want. Because to me, I went the opposite direction. He continues to try to people please even more so. I went the opposite direction.
Really,
you're going to hate me anyway, so I might as well make you hate me.
I have really developed this like extreme empathy. I don't know how to explain it.
How about just empathy?
It's empathy, but sometimes I take it too far because I like.
Who says?
Because I get obsessed with
you just
how other people feel, and I try to understand why they feel a certain way. And I'm like, well, even when somebody does something horrible, I'm like, well, why would they do that? What would drive a person to do this thing? And it can get me into trouble because sometimes I try to
like over contextualize and over understand.
Yeah, like somebody does something horrible. Let's say they commit a mass shooting, and I'm like, well, why would this person do this? What drove them to this? And I like almost feel bad for them in a way, but at the same time, like I know they did something horrible. And then I feel bad about feeling bad for the person who did something horrible. I'm like, I shouldn't feel bad for them. They did something bad. But like, I still feel bad that society sometimes treats people so shitty that they end up doing shitty things, like hurt people, right?
I don't think that's a bad perspective to have in general, because I think being able to take a beat, that's what we teach kids, is take a beat and think about all the other factors. One of the biggest pet peeves I have is that there's some autistic kiddos that struggle at all ages, right? I'm saying like 5 to 19 that struggle with perspective taking. And then we write these terrible perspective taking goals. And like, they don't really struggle with perspective taking as much as like they can't see outside of their own experience. Right.
Right.
And then there's other profiles of learners at all ages, again, where like they over contextualize, they see the whole picture. And what's difficult for that, and I don't want to like read you or anything like that, but I kind of fall into that category. It's very easy for me to then not ever set boundaries. I'm like, well, I understand that you were raised by a raging alcoholic grandmother and abandoned at the age of 15. And then you had this terrible relationship. So now 10 years later, we've gotten into this friendship and now you're taking it out on me. So I guess I kind of understand.
And then now you're just making excuses for people, and that like you need to hold them accountable somewhat. Right. And actually what you were saying, I used to be more of the other person. When I was younger, I couldn't see anything about outside my own perspective. And what happened, it got me into trouble the opposite way, because I used to get into conflict a lot. I would get into fights with people all the time because I couldn't see anything outside my own. People would be like, well, don't you understand what you said is hurtful? I'm like, no.
You're like, no.
I don't. But now I've overcompensated in a way. And now I'm the extreme opposite, like where I try to put everything in context. And then sometimes I'm making excuses for people, or I'm accepting behavior that I shouldn't because I'm like, oh, well, they're not really a bad person. They just, like you said, you start listing off all the things that's going on in their life, and you're making excuses for them in a way. But I also like the fact that I don't just write people off.
Yeah.
I think the gray between, right, the middle ground between the two, we should be able to understand another person's perspective, even if we disagree with what they've done because of it. At the same time, we shouldn't allow ourselves to fall into the trap of not being able to set boundaries with somebody because we're making excuses. So it's really finding that gray area.
Let me ask you a question. If I were to ask you, what are your top 10 values? Could you name them very clearly?
Yes.
No.
And I'm saying that without actually sitting down to write them. But yes, I'm pretty sure I could do that.
Okay. Can I tell you why I asked that question?
Because most people can't do that.
Most people can't do that.
Right.
And then we end up trying to figure our stuff out, our crap out with other social interactions based on the other person's needs. And so something that for the longest time was confusing for me, man. Like it was so confusing growing up, trying to balance coming from an Eastern European like culture at home, which was very different. Like my house was a slice of the USSR. I didn't speak English in my home until much later. I was an English as a second language student, right? And then at school, all this American culture stuff, and there's subcultures to American culture, right? It's not like one. It was so confusing to learn all the landmines of the expectations that are always hidden, right? And then we project that forever, and then we're constantly being like, okay, how do I not make my partner upset? How do I not make my boss hate me? How do I make my coworkers not ostracize me at work? And I feel like I was losing my mind. But with kids, I would always I wouldn't take my own advice, I guess. I would be like, what are the things that are important to you? Can we get that down? And then that's how we got to and I talk about it on my TikTok, like the rules of friendship. Autistics struggle with friendship as a group because we either overcompensate to what you said, right? Like you overcompensate, overcontextualize, or you're like, I'm just gonna be hated, so I don't care. I'm a whatever. And there's no in between.
You get a little clingy sometimes too. Like if we're trying to overcompensate, you might smother somebody. You make a new friend, and you're like, oh,
I've done that.
It's very, very hard for us to understand how to bridge that gap between our desire for for those of us that want that. Some of us really are good alone and they don't want that. And I want to respect that and honor that and affirm that. But like for those of us that want that social connection, it is so, so, so confusing how to navigate that. And so finally, if you can name what's important to you and still leave room for growth, you're not like, I'm done. If I learn that, the world is upside down, that I'm never going to change my perspective, I'm fixed forever.
Right.
Like you have to leave some room for growth. Then you kind of have to stop making all these moves for other people because you're going to make yourself miserable and then you lose who you are. And that's kind of like the cost of masking, I think, so much. I was just at a lunch with a clinical researcher who's autistic, who does research on autistic burnout. He's like, the cost of masking is like we lose ourselves. We don't know who we are. We lose it entirely, and then we try to figure it out and piece it back together. And it's really, really hard because if you know who you are and what's important to you, whether it makes sense to other people or not,
that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It matters that you're gonna like keep your core self kind of like consistent.
I actually hold a belief now. I'm not a researcher and I don't have a fancy degree of being a therapist or whatnot. And I'm prefacing what I'm about to say with that just because I want nobody to misunderstand what I'm about to say. I actually hold a belief that I've carried for a very long time that no one can actually truly lose their core self. That who you truly are deep down, the most basic version of who you are as a person cannot alter or change. Nobody can take that away from you. Sometimes we get lost in the rest of our BS. Sometimes we get lost in our preferences, life around us happening, that we start to lose touch with it. But I don't believe it ever leaves us. I believe our absolute core version of self is unflinching and never alters. It's the things around it that do.
I don't have anything to push back on that. I think I have some thoughts about like what happens if you're autistic and schizophrenic. What happens when you're autistic and you have, dissociative identity disorder and you have like a system that splinters? Like it's kind of hard to figure out then like what's your core self. But I think philosophically I might agree.
Right. And it's so some of those other things. So I'm autistic and bipolar, right?
Right.
I would say understanding who that core self is, that's why it took me so long to get there and to truly understand it. And I'm not 100% there. Those other things just made it more difficult to see it sometimes.
That makes sense.
And so it's not that it's not there, but my ability to see and connect to it is sometimes a little skewed because of things around me. Maybe it's a bad relationship I'm in and I'm questioning who I am. So I'm becoming more separated from it. But then once I leave that relationship and I try to get in touch with myself, I'm connecting again. You know what I mean? But that's kind of the way I look at it in a lot of ways, because when certain events happen to people, and I'll say especially for autistic people, because we have tendency to be hurt a lot.
Oh, yeah.
That in itself separates us from us, because a lot of us have tendency to start to question if we're good, worth it, valuable, but we ain't asking us. We're asking for the world to do that for us, right?
I really like that model of like there's walls and barriers between you and you being able to get in touch with who your true self and your core values. And because it's so interesting to watch kids, right? And I think honestly, I don't know if I would have realized I'm autistic if it wasn't for working with autistic kids.
Right.
Like I think I probably would have gone into like my 50s being undiagnosed, right? Because watching kids kind of lose touch as their needs were unmet, as they got socially rejected, as they got misunderstood or misrepresented, as they tried to take on different masks and roles to try and survive socially. Like some of my boys are like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna be a jock." I'm like, "Baby boy, you're not a jock. I love you. But, like, we'll kill you on the football." Right, as they try to take on the role of like the cool girl or like whatever, and I was like, I saw so much of that. I was like, whoa, like this is so interesting because it's you're not being genuine to yourself, and it's normal like try on different identities and try on different roles and stuff. And I wonder sometimes with some of the stuff where we're punching each other, whether in online spaces or in person or conversations in general, with all these landmines of triggers. I honestly wonder if some folks who are autistic, especially the late diagnosed ones, if they've done the work of grieving who they were as kids, like the grief of looking back at who you were as a child and what got taken away from you as you kind of kept surviving and trying to navigate like a world that's not built for you, a world that is determined to misunderstand you and misrepresent you.
Right. And I like you saying it that way, determined to misunderstand.
I think that part of me, I would say that it, for lack of a better way to phrase it, that part of me is probably dead at this point, or at least mostly dead.
The former person you were?
Yeah, I'm not the same person I was when I was a teenager.
You're not the same person you were 12 months ago.
Yes.
2 minutes ago.
But
well, okay, we can go that far too. Yeah, absolute. What I'm saying that
I was unrecognizable to who I am now, personality wise. And there were certain things about myself that I'm glad that I changed. Like there's a difference between masking and changing behavior
to better yourself. And
right. I'll give you an example. And I mentioned this on the show before, but like one thing that I used to do that would bother other people is I used to have proximity thing. Like I'd get really close to people when I talk to them. I don't have to do that, but I just did it because I wasn't thinking about other people's personal space. I don't do that anymore. And I don't think about it because I just train myself not to do it. Is that masking? Not really, because like, I don't care if I get close to people or not. I did it unconsciously without realizing it. I wasn't thinking about people's personal space. But the person I was is when I was younger, when I was a kid, and when I was much more open and in touch with my emotions. I wrote a lot of poetry. I was much more creative. I used to draw. I did art. And over the repeated punches that I received, metaphorical punches, that person just is not there anymore. I'm not as creative. I don't write and share my feelings as much as I used to. Because I used to openly share my feelings with people, and after so much of negative experiences, it's just like, all right, well, I'm not that person anymore. Just like you just stop.
So I want to say this because I hear this a lot online, and over the years of just talking to people about mental health and stuff, I've heard this a lot too. People talk about and you said it before, and actually in the context you said it, I agree with you about shame not being a good teacher. In a lot of ways, people talk about how it's so bad to make people feel guilty or embarrassment or shame and all of these things. And to a degree, yes, but there's also a level of how you walk away from it. Like, was your perception, oh, fuck me, I should just go die? Or is the perception like you did? Well, what can I do to change what I'm doing? Or should it be something that I change or not about myself? Like, I don't know.
I don't know a single person that's autistic, whether they're early diagnosed or late diagnosed, that hasn't changed because of being rejected and painfully shamed or embarrassed or guilted though. And like, I really wish that wasn't how we would teach each other things or get taught things in general, because
agreed. There's more effective ways to do it.
I think it creates a level of like, I don't even know why that was wrong. I just know I have to like, okay. So, and then it becomes not just that was wrong. For many of us, I think it becomes, I am wrong. Like there's like as a person wrong.
Yeah, it's not my behavior and my choice was wrong. It's I am bad.
Well, for the personal space thing, it was people that I worked with and coworkers and stuff would be like, "Hey, how come you get so close?" And I just didn't. I'm like, "Oh, do I? Like, am I in your problem?" But like, they weren't shaming me. Sometimes they would make jokes about it, like, but they weren't like being mean. They would tease me a little bit about it,
which is still a level of
some of the other stuff, like being shamed for being open about my feelings or being emotional or writing poetry and being artistic.
Dude, we're men. We don't have emotion.
That type of stuff was much more painful. It's like, okay, well, I'm, being a creative individual. I'm writing, I'm sharing my feelings. And it's like, no, like you don't do that. That's lame or that's stupid or, you're homosexual or whatever. It's like, okay.
But this is how we get incels. This is how we get incels.
Yes.
Like this is it. It's which I firmly believe is a very deeply autistic subgroup.
Yes, a lot of them are.
He does too.
You know why? Because I used to creep in a lot of those spaces.
I used to creep in those spaces too. Because I'd be like, what the heck?
I used to creep in a lot of those spaces, and a lot of those people are autistic, and in fact, I was watching a documentary on the incel killer not so long ago, the one in California who went on like a shooting spree. He was autistic.
I'm sorry, the who?
The incel killer. That's what they call him.
When did that happen?
I don't know, 10 years ago.
Oh,
he went on a shooting spree, but he was autistic.
In the States. It doesn't make.
But it was. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, this doesn't excuse any of the horrible things he did, but I kind of felt bad for him a little bit. But like all the social rejection that he faced, just people constantly shitting on him, and at some point he's just like, he snapped.
I'd like to mention that a lot of autistic folks get very traumatized and have a lot of trauma and have been treated like crap because of the way they look, the way they act, the things they like, things like that. But then and a lot of those people turn around and then do it to somebody else without thinking to themselves, hey, maybe I should just say hi.
Or
maybe I should just ask how they're doing.
One thing that's like, unique, or not unique, but one thing, because it's not unique to men, but one thing that I think is a problem when it comes to, we're talking about men in this, because incels, usually we're talking about guys, right? I'm talking about usually younger guys who have no social skills, don't know how to interact with people.
Let's not say no.
They've internalized scripts about relationships, women, men. They've internalized that this like a hyper heteronormative version of attractiveness and desirability.
What they think the social expectation is of it.
Like I think about it's kind of like me reading like Cosmo at 15 and trying to figure out how to be like an attractive girl. What are the rules, but to an extreme, right?
And we have a tendency of falling into extremist beliefs as autistic people.
Everybody falls. No, do you think?
Yeah, but I'm saying we have like it's not that regular people don't too. It's just that we're more vulnerable about falling into some of those things
because we're so rule based. We want to know what the rules are. We need the rules to like function. So our anxiety is managed so we could prepare ourselves. Like, okay, here are the rules, and it's so funny because I think the rules are often invisible. Like, where do we get these rules from? I'll give you an example. I had a kid, we'll call him G, right? G, when other kids would be speaking Spanish, G is not Spanish speaking, not from a Spanish speaking culture, is a white kid from America. Would be like, I don't speak Mexican. Okay. And this is a fifth grader, and everyone's like, oh my God, G, that's so racist. Like, you can't say that. He, deeply autistic, does not understand what is racist about what he said. He didn't say, I hate Mexicans, I hate Spanish speakers. He can't click in. So he gets
because he associates them speaking with
He didn't even know that other cultures other than Mexican people speak Spanish at the time. He just had never been exposed to that. And so we had a lot. I actually have a video on this somewhere where I talk about how we had to break down this rule that he had because he had these rules in his head. They were keeping him from being able to take accountability for hurting someone else's feelings, right? He's like, he eventually was like, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that what I was saying was hurtful. Right. And now I know, and I won't do that again. It's like, it was a process of learning.
Yeah.
But the moment we do this fixed identity thing of like, you're an ableist, you're this fixed identity.
Put the label.
We've already written off. We assume you can't learn.
Yes.
And I don't know who in general, regardless of their level of oppression, their history, their trauma,
the context of them,
it's just done learning forever. We're just done.
Right.
And I also hate the fact that now the internet, and I don't know if this resonates at all, but now a lot of therapy language is weaponized online, and we do it to each other. We do it to each other. We're like, you're a narcissist. And I'm
like, here,
what?
do me
That's
a favor.
Go
read the criteria.
I don't have NPD, friends.
Yeah.
I'm just autistic.
I actually really hate it because there's a group of people, and I'm not trying to invalidate their belief that they are diagnosing themselves as borderline, but like when they're talking about borderline, it is clearly that's not what they're talking about. You know what I mean? Like and I'm not trying to say that
they don't even know what the actual criteria is for being that thing. They just apply the label.
And they don't even it's not even like they read a story of somebody who actually has borderline. No, they're just saying, well, this is borderline. And like,
same thing with autism though. I feel like this is kind of what's happened is I do see, I think this is originally what you and I started connecting on in a live that I think you joined at one point as a commenter. Where I was like, I see a lot of, because I love information sharing. I love the internet for ability to connect and get information, but also, man, like, I'm like, people are saying things are autistic traits that are clearly BPD traits.
Yes.
And people are saying autistic traits are NPD traits. I'm like, these are not the same.
Or and applying things to as autism that are not autistic traits, but maybe just a trait about you who is an autistic person.
Or just human. Sorry.
Right. And I think also then there's a conversation that needs to be had about how the DSM, who it's built by, what it's missing, that it's a Western pathology model. We get that.
Yes.
But also like people are straight up dying without services and supports.
And it's like, so we need diagnosis to be able to get those services. We need
it's like you want a totally neurodiversity affirming model that is a social model. And that model will not support our highest support needs folks.
Not even remotely.
No, we're talking, and they're completely left out of the conversation. And so I feel like there's this tension where folks that are lower support needs, and I know it'll like change, like L1 folks or however we're going to end up being relabeled in the new DSM. Right. Like, but folks who are speaking, folks who have been able to hold down part-time or full-time work, folks who are able to have at least one stable relationship, folks who you have support needs. You have support needs. But it is drastically different than needing 24/7 hour care with multiple comorbidities, with someone with elopement, pica, asphyxiation, with
the people in my group
self-injurious behavior that is truly life-threatening.
The folks I work with.
Right. Yeah. Wait, where do you work with?
I work at a group. I work at a group home. I'm the manager of a group home. And I have several individuals who are on the spectrum. There's other stuff going on too, but they're on the spectrum and they're all high support needs. And two of the people would not be able to do the TikToking that we do. One of the people could, but there's still a lot of help that would be needed. And when I hear people talk about we need to get rid of the levels labeling, and it's just low support and high support, to me, we're still missing something by doing that. And we're still basically wiping away actual, and I'm sorry to say it this way, but I'm the asshole here. We're wiping away people who are truly severely autistic who need our fucking representation. They need us to talk for them, literally talk for them. And yet when somebody goes online and is like, I don't like it, that's ableist, I don't like you saying autism, it hurts my feelings. Well, fuck you. My person's got to sit in the house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and can't even say their feelings are hurt. So shut up.
I have kids with the memory of less than like a minute, right? Literally. I have kids who who have ARFID, they need a feeding tube because they can't eat. They have a very limited palate. Their sensory processing is through the roof. They literally can't engage with anything. They're having multiple meltdowns a day. They're non-speaking, even with AAC devices, even with sign language. They're still not able to access a full range of communication. And we just don't care about them because we care about our beautiful, late diagnosed, whatever. And I'm like, I don't understand the lack of solidarity.
I'm a quirky genius.
Ooh, right there. That's the word. That's the word that I love talking about right now for our community. Solidarity. Because instead of shitting on each other and telling each other what we can and cannot say, what we can and cannot call ourselves, how we can word it, how we can't word it, how about we all understand that we are a community And why don't we unite? Because
you want a community that is largely white people online. Do you know, like, you're asking for a pie in the sky situation, man? You're asking, you want what?
I want a full community, though.
We can't agree on cheese.
I know.
We can't agree on cheese. Like,
I mean, but that's just it. Like,
what was the? You said you had seen a live where somebody mentioned our podcast. Huh?
Oh,
I don't know if you want to bring that up or
there
not.
was a live that somebody
and
was
they made a
about
bunch of assumptions about our podcast, and they'd never seen it. They said they assumed that we were misogynist or something.
Right,
like,
just because we're white males, they made all these assumptions about it because they saw a picture of me and Steve.
They're like, oh, there's too many white guys talking about autism. Like,
yeah,
okay, like, maybe there are, but like,
no,
you're gonna assume that what my beliefs are and what my feelings are.
I mean, I think one of the things that I want more white folks doing podcasts to do is highlight podcasts of people of color. And like, I want them to be like, hey, if you watch us, you might also enjoy this one.
That we do.
Right. I think that's like a good method, but I think it's also privilege is misunderstood in a large way. And I'm biased when I say this. I think if your job is, if you have some kind of privilege to be listened to because of, societal standards, your job is to use that privilege to help, like, you're not just supposed to sit on your privilege
where we are,
right? Yeah. and give access. And so, like, let's say y'all blow up and you end up having like 100,000 or like 1 million followers. You'll be able to highlight and throughout the process, I believe we both will highlight other folks that will also, like, you want to bring people up. I think there's this thing of like, if I'm coming up, I want to bring you with me. Yeah. And there's this, instead of this punching down, where I feel like we come from such a scarcity mindset online about like resources, accommodation. It's such a weird scarcity mindset about things that are like abstract. It's just weird to me. It's like when we talk about like autistic diagnoses, and I'm like, and it's like, oh, it's bad if more people get diagnosed. I'm like, I think we need to talk about the real impacts of what's happening with people that are like me, who are incredibly verbal, able to hold down a job, have relationships, who have support needs. I have support needs. I'm disabled. But it's very different than folks that have incredibly high support needs and I need a full-time caretaker.
Yeah.
And I think we need to talk about how the system is not working the way it is. And I kind of wish it was a buffet of like, okay, where are you in social skills of this kind? Where are you in communication skills? Right. Where are you in rigidity? Where are you in being able to toilet yourself? Where are you,
well, I mean, they do those assessments when it comes to people who are higher support needs to find the services needed, but they're not doing that kind of stuff for people who are level 1. They're not really doing that for low support needs people. Some of us need it, but to a degree. And like a lot of those assessments, if any one of the three of us took some of those assessments that I've seen for high support needs people, we don't qualify for nothing because they're designed for higher support needs folks. Like the threshold of what it accounts for.
We don't know what we're doing with lower support needs people at all. We have no tools.
I think there's a problem.
Company about trying to help low support needs people.
There's a video I mentioned that I recorded a bunch of more videos I'm going to put up on TikTok. One of them I just did was about the ADA, which is not up yet. But one of the things I mentioned in it, try to mention some of the good things and like being able to understand what legal rights you have and all that. But I also point out too that like some of the problems with it. And the language is very vague. Like, what is a reasonable accommodation? What is an undue burden? It's we don't know. Like I had an issue with a company where I was just requesting certain things, nothing even major. Like I think I was requesting for certain things to either be written down or to be explained in a different way because I had a boss who was horrible at explaining things to me. And I don't usually have a hard time understanding people, but he was just so vague. He expected me to just know what he wanted. I'm like, I have no fucking clue what you want me to do. No idea. He's like, oh, just do it. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't know what you mean. Can you please explain to me what the fuck you want me to do? And then they complain that I'm not doing my job. I'm like, well, I don't know what you want me to do. Yep. I've done everything that you've asked me to do.
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
So that actually brings me back to something.
Is that a reasonable accommodation? Apparently not. I don't know.
That actually
it is. The problem is it's up to the employer.
Yeah.
To decide.
It should be an independent third-party person, in my opinion, who gets to decide that shit.
Yes.
I don't think either one of the two people involved should be the primary person to decide whether it's reasonable. Because the person asking for accommodation, of course, they already think it's reasonable. They're asking for it.
Hold on. And part of this problem, too, is a lot of people are undiagnosed.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're self-diagnosed and you don't have an official diagnosis, good luck with your reasonable accommodation.
So I will say that I have told, granted I have, but like when I got diagnosed with bipolar, I told jobs that I had bipolar, and they would ask, what accommodation do you need? And I said, I don't actually need an accommodation. I'm telling you for moments that you're going to be like, people don't do that. And I had a boss just be like, well, I can't really give you accommodation if you piss somebody off. And I said, but I need you to understand why they think I said something wrong.
Oh, I feel like this is the meat of what I'd want to talk about, honestly. Ooh, okay. So I think, oh man. Okay. So I really think
I'm having such a hard time holding my tongue.
we have gaslit all disabled people, not just autistics, but in general, or autists, however folks identify, about the workplace. I think we have gaslit everyone because, okay, from the employer side, most workplaces are trying to replicate a corporate model where they need a lot of homogeneity, right? They need a lot of it to be very, very homogeneous, consistent, efficient, cookie cutter. Shut up, do your job, smile at me, wear your suit, whatever.
Everybody's got the same cubicle that looks exactly the same. And
if I ever sit in a cubicle again, I will light it on fire. So,
am I like the only person who's happy with a cubicle?
I hate cubicles.
I love them, especially if I could put a door on mine. I'd be such a happy guy. If you put a door on it,
it's an office.
Yeah, but I'd be such a happy guy with an office that small.
I worked in an office with cubicles, and it was like 10 or 15 cubicles in a row, sitting next to other people all day.
I could hear everyone, and I was like, I can't. But
not only that, but people come by your desk and they start like distracting you or asking you questions and bullshitting, and like, I can't get my job done because people are constantly coming up to me.
Oh,
yes to that, and also I'm the person coming up to you distracting because I've already done my job for the day in 2 hours, and now I want to chat. It's so. I think it's like the biggest thing. I think workplaces say they want to be disability inclusive, right? But what they really mean is like maybe at best, some physical disability.
We put in a wheelchair ramp. Isn't that good enough?
Yes.
Maybe, right? But then beyond that, there's nothing that is going to be an invisible disability. Even just a learning disability like dyslexia is not really accommodated. No. And they're like, so things that generally from workplace, like boss, supervisor, manager, typos in your email. You don't have the right tone in your email. You talk to your colleagues too formally or informally. You don't dress the right way. And then you think about all these things also. If you are a person of color, then get weaponized an additional level, right? Because of racism on top of that, which several of the people I've coached over the years, like I would say 25%, have experienced both invisible disability, and they're also a person of color, specifically Black and brown folks. And then they get it double because they're like being accused of being unprofessional or uncooperative or like whatever. And I'm like, literally to me, I'm like, I don't have a problem with this person. Like we communicate fine. I'm like, I'm a little more flexible. If I tell them they need to change something, they do it. I just have to be really direct, and we're cool.
Right.
But it's like a lot, the passive aggression that we can't, that's my big trigger. I will own that. I can't deal with passive aggression. I can't. I will straight up be like, I'm sorry. Hi, do you have a problem with what I said? Because you seem really upset.
Yeah, I do it too. I do it too at work. Yep.
It's just, I'm like, just what the concept of passive aggression also, like now, for the last 5 years I've lived in Seattle, which culturally to me is not a great fit. Not a great fit for so many reasons as an East Coaster. But
wait, where are you from?
I think I was born in Ukraine and raised in Baltimore County and City. So I'm from Maryland.
Okay, you're from Maryland. All right.
Yeah, and then I taught in New
Boston.
York.
We're near Boston, so.
Yeah. I looked you up. Yeah, I don't do anything on it. Right.
Wow, we got one person who knows how to look us up.
She's got some Eastern European connections.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, can I pause where you're at real quick? Because you said it twice, and I gotta ask. Because you said you're in your mid-30s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you keep calling it USSR. Wasn't it dissolved by the time you were born?
No, I was born in like 90. like 90. So it was dissolved in 91, at the end of 91.
Oh, I apologize. You were born in the USSR.
I just keep thinking of the Beatles
months.
song. I'm back in the USSR.
Yeah.
Well,
It literally says it on my birth certificate, and it said it on my first passport.
Okay, totally get it now. It's just every time you said it, I'm thinking it dissolved in the early 90s. How old is this person?
My dad is Russian, and my mom is Ukrainian.
Yeah.
And my grandma...
Well, tell him to slow down.
Second. Hold on. Wait a second. One's Russian, one's Ukrainian.
Uh-huh.
I just see all Russian. I mean, that's just... No, I'm just kidding.
I almost flipped you off, but it's fine.
Oh, I was okay. Ooh, no, I was joking.
I know.
Okay. I think that was a joke back, but I'm not sure. I'm autistic. Okay. So
every place in that part of the world is just part of Russia. Really.
I think this right here, this given moment, is exactly what's missing in most autistic spaces. People are so stupid serious about every fucking little thing that they can't fucking laugh. Like,
somebody might get offended about my Ukraine joke. Some people would get really offended by that.
And they might, but here's the thing.
I don't actually believe that it was joke. It was sarcasm. But
and even if you did mean it seriously, you as a human being listening to it gets to decide how you're going to react to it. Like,
and what if it played out differently? What if I was like, "Hey, that's not funny"? You would have been like, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
My bad. We were trying to make a joke. Clearly, it was bad.
Yeah.
Then we move on.
Right.
I think there's such a everything is urgent and everything is an emergency and everything is a level 10, and we're all like this, so tense.
That's right.
And I'm like, from working with your clients in your group home, you laugh your butt off all day
You
have to.
You have to
Laugh. You have to laugh. Most of my favorite moments teaching have been laughing with kids when things are just crazy.
Yep.
Because if everything is so serious and dire, y'all, we're not going to make it. I honestly believe that.
If you hold on to that stress, you're going to burn out or you're going to hurt somebody.
Yes.
I started saying something earlier and then we kind of got sidetracked before I really finished it. But it's okay.
Where I was born and if I'm actually telling the truth, yeah, go on.
No, I started saying that there was something that I thought was kind of an issue with men in particular.
There's no issues with men.
Okay. It may not, when you're talking about people who have more support needs, maybe not with them, but more so with people like us, maybe some of the incel people we were talking about earlier. I think that a problem with a lot of men is they don't know how to express emotions. The only way they know how to express things is through with aggression or anger.
Right.
It's like
that's all we were allowed to.
You said it got, maybe metaphorically punched out of you from an earlier age.
Of being sensitive, being like,
yeah.
Not being able to show vulnerability or cry or show love or affection.
So look, I've talked about this on the show before. I danced ballet as a kid for 6 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And I loved being emotional. I still love, well, now I do, like 30 years later, I enjoy being emotional again. But like when I was dancing ballet, I was surrounded by a lot of women. I mean, we were under the age of 10, so, girls when I was a boy. And we would cry together. We would laugh together. We'd joke together. The second I got in my neighborhood around any of the boys in my neighborhood, there was one question I got regularly. They hot?
Or are you gay?
Oh, no. There was no are you. It's you are. Because how could you be around that many girls and not,
I got that a lot because I've always had a lot of...
Because they're my friends.
I've always had a lot of LGBTQ friends. And that's how happened to me all the time is people would just like... I don't like it didn't offend me.
Yeah.
What offended me, like not asking me if I'm gay or assuming I'm gay. That doesn't, I don't care like what you think about me that way. But it was annoying to me that you would just assume like why, like, is it weird that I have gay friends? Like why does that automatically make me like, so what? People who are not gay can't have a lot of gay friends. Like I don't like that doesn't make, that was the part that offended me.
Stephen.
I'm like, what the hell?
People assume I'm hetero all the fucking time.
To be in your shoes. I've observed folks in your shoes for many years, almost like a, what's the word? Not our anthropological study, right? Like I'm watching you like survive the pressures of being socialized man, right? Like, and it sucks. I'm looking over there and every time I'm like, nah, I'm good.
Like, oh, you're gay, you're gay. I'm like, why?
No.
Even from my own family, my family would do it to me. They would like, I had a lot of gay male friends in high school, and I was like, whatever, they're just my friends, like whatever.
Of course,
but they would assume there's some kind of like they would assume that there's like a sexual relationship or that there's some guy. I'm like,
but it's so common.
So I can't have a guy friend who's gay, and that means we're having sex. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
It's common for autistic boys to be targeted in general. I mean, autistic children in general, right? And autistic women and autistic LGBT and trans folks, whatever. But if we're on the topic of socialized, of male socialized people, right? I think there's specific violences that get enacted onto all.
Hold on, I do want to say this because you said male socialized, and I'm not correcting you, but I'm just wording it differently in general because it's not male socialized, it's masculine or man socialized, because male would be the genetic, man would be the social.
So way to be pedantic.
No. The reason why is because I actually find it very important to make a distinction between man and male.
Fine. Yeah, I think I'm fine. I think you're speaking that it's our concept of the gender, not even. I get. I used to talk about keyboard warrior stuff, and I promise it's connected. When I was like, there's more than one gender, I'd also be like, there's more than one biological sex, and people would be like, no, and I'd be like, wow, I don't know how you ignore science. So yeah, I think that's a better way to put it. I think that makes a good distinction.
And the reason why is because I have a friend who chooses to identify, and I say chooses for this specific reason because of what we're talking about, is they identify as being male, and a woman.
Yeah, sure.
And first time I ever heard that, I went, I don't understand at all. Please explain this to me and talk with small words, please, because I don't get any of that.
So much hate if you put this part of the podcast up on TikTok. I can't wait. Oh my God.
I mean, I won't if you don't want me to. Yeah, I'm usually the one who posts everything.
I don't care. I am so like, it is really hard to be an out non-binary teacher who, I've been out my entire career, right?
Okay.
Specifically when I work with populations that come from places where it's a lot of homophobia, a lot of transphobia, because of colonization.
And all the other factors that cause people to hate those groups.
Right. So like I've watched man socialization. I've watched that from an anthropological study, I guess, afar, and I don't think. I mean, it's terrible. It's truly horrible. And what I've seen in my kids who identify as boys who are autistic, we oh my God, we destroy so much beautiful, like truly beautiful traits in them, like their interest, their ability to connect, their curiosity, their openness, their earnestness, their genuineness. Like it's so awful to watch them realize, okay, I have to like kill all the soft, gentle, kind parts of myself to fit in and be one in their minds desirable by women oftentimes, right? And then often accepted by their friends who are guys. It's like it's watching a slow kind of death that it is so painful to watch. And I'm not going to say it doesn't happen in an equivalent way. It's just different, I think. I mean, how did we not know I was autistic? At 15, I came out to my entire biology class, and my biology teacher, God bless him, went, yeah, that sounds right, and just kept on teaching. So
when you said you were non-binary,
I didn't come out as non-binary until I was an adult. I came out as like LGBTQ. Like I came out as like bi, I think, or gay. I don't remember what I said at that point at 15. And he just like, it was middle biology, and he just turned. I was in the back of the room. I screamed it. I was having a private conversation with a guy who's like, no way. And I was like, yes, I am. And then he just turns, and his name is Mr. Krager. And he turns and he goes, yeah, that sounds right. And just keeps teaching like nothing happened.
I came out as bisexual about 9 years ago.
Congratulations.
Like, I held it until then. Oh, I don't need congratulations for that. It's the way I've always felt.
Easy. I know, but it's not easy to, especially for folks who are seen as men, to own that though. It's not easy.
Oh, it's very hard for us. In fact, even when I said it, people were like, All right, cool. Whatever. Whatever.
Think,
but one person said, but you still like women. And I was like, yeah, that's why it's
That's
too.
the definition.
Douchebag. And he was like, well, how does it change who you are? And I said, it doesn't.
I think the non-binary, because I didn't really know much about non-binary until, I don't know, maybe like 10 years ago or so when we started to hear more about it.
Well, it's kind of
because when I was growing up, like people didn't really, it wasn't really a term that people used.
Yeah, not so
At
much.
least not as much. So I didn't really know much about it. But once I started learning more about what that means and like why people identify that way, I'm like, it makes a lot of sense as an autistic person, because a lot of us have a hard time fitting into certain expectations anyway, right?
The rules don't make sense. We're like, this is
so like
BS.
had I been raised a different way, I might identify that way too, because a lot of those traits of myself that people would have considered more feminine, I've kind of like beaten a lot of those traits out of myself. And so, you know, I am what I am now. I'm not like an extremely masculine macho guy, but
that is a true statement.
But at the same time, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have cried on this podcast at least 4 times over the last year.
I could, if I don't cry once a week, I get backed up. I call it my eyeball constipation.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I accidentally hit the space bar and stopped recording for a second.
Oh, all right. So I described myself in that previous episode as being overly emotional, but in that episode and being able to talk to Steve about it, I was like, no, I'm not overly emotional. I'm emotional because this is the level of emotion for me. Like I should not be comparing, but that's one of those things we got to work through as human beings, right? That comparison to others, even though we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to only to ourselves. I default back to my Albert Ellis book, The Myth of Self-Esteem. I default back to that.
I kind of want to tie it back to workplace stuff because I think that's where my brain got stuck.
Yeah, sure.
If that's okay. I think in general, like we're like, okay, hey, you might need to use a cane at work and we might need to get you. And I'm not saying that people with physical disabilities that are visible always have their accommodations honored. It's actually not the case. But I think if when workplaces are like, disclose your disability, and I'm like, I will never when I apply to a job, and I tell people do not disclose your disability until you get hired. No. Straight up. Do not do it. Because there's no tracking they don't have to report out how many people applied and said, yes, I have a disability up front, and how many were denied.
And there's no way to prove that they discriminated against you for that reason.
None.
How are you going to prove it? Somebody just says, hey, let's not hire that person. Why? It doesn't matter.
They seemed really unprofessional.
Yeah.
Or they just acted differently.
If we're really going to change the fact that a lot of autistics are underemployed or unemployed, we get burnout. That's not just workplace burnout, but autistic burnout, which I could talk about forever. I think we're really going to change that. Workplace accommodations is not it. It's workplace culture. The culture, it's not like here is the box and then you get a little extra because that's the accommodation. And it's like, no, the whole culture does not work to fit in people with any kind of invisible or less visible needs. So if
it doesn't allow people to work in differences of any type.
At all whatsoever. But it's like, and that includes like cultural differences, linguistic differences. And so you have this like monoculture, right? Like this one thing. And so the number of times, to be really transparent, that I was told, you can't say that. And I'd be like, why? Why can't I say that? Oh, yes, that's true, but you hurt someone's feelings. I'm like, what? Huh? I had a coworker who got drunk. This was years ago at like an end of year celebration, right?
Sure.
And was pressuring my other coworker, who I think is a much older man who's autistic, to drink. He doesn't drink. He has his own reasons. We don't know why. He's never disclosed why. And this guy was screaming at him because he was blackout drunk in a restaurant. And I said, hey man, because I don't do bystander. This is my problem. I'm painfully not a bystander. It's like, hey man, like leave him alone. Like just leave him alone. He doesn't want to drink, right? I got reamed out, screamed out, called every name under the sun. This is my coworker. My supervisor saw this. I have a meltdown. At the time, I don't know it's a meltdown. I am crying, but I was calm. I didn't yell back. I left. That person gets the consequence of being demoted. He was going to be a principal, right? And they demote him. Everyone at my job the next year thought that I had essentially gotten a black man who was up for a promotion like demoted on purpose because I like cried white girl tears or some stuff.
Wow.
And I was like, and so for the rest of that year, and eventually I won back some of my coworkers' trust and stuff like that. But I was like so confused because in my mind, the rule is you stand up for people, right?
Okay.
Like, that's the rule is like, hey, he was pressuring this guy and my coworker, he's very timid. He was like, no. He's like, come on, man, and like shoving the shot at him and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I was doing the right thing. That kind of encapsulates my social confusion in professional spaces constantly. I'm like, I thought we're supposed to do the right thing. My rules, my values, to go back.
We worked at the same company briefly.
We did.
And I had not exactly the same experience as you, but
he was in charge.
I had experience where I got into kind of like this weird situation where we had a boss. Yeah. This was before he started.
That's true. I
had a boss rather, who the owner of the company came in and the company wasn't up to whatever his standards were. I, being naive, decided to give him honest feedback. I never complained about the manager. I never said the manager did anything wrong. In fact, someone else apparently had actually been talking shit about the manager, and I didn't know about this. Mm-hmm. The guy ended up getting fired. He offered me a promotion because I had a bunch of things that I said that I think would help the company, and he was like, oh, you have some good ideas. Everybody assumed that I got the manager fired, and I was treated like shit for the next year because they all thought that I got him fired and that I wanted to take his place. So I'm like, I had nothing to do with this guy getting fired.
They actually believed he set him up.
Yeah, they thought that I set this whole thing. I'm like,
there's this like projection manipulation. And I will be honest, I think there's some misinformation on the internet. They're like, autistics don't lie, autistics don't manipulate. We do.
Yeah,
we absolutely can. At all levels of support need and intellectual disability. And
I was trying to be helpful and then I got into this like,
and I think that's why I think you have said that the intention does matter and like the full context does matter because
always.
And it's so crappy because I think we're at a place where we've internalized so much capitalism and white supremacy that we just want to blame and not actually solve. Like, and this is what we see in online spaces. We want validation. We don't want solutions. We don't actually. So it's like, you just want to be like, okay, whose fault is it? And not wait, let me understand the problem. And like
what you said before about the monocultures and stuff at businesses.
Yeah.
People don't actually stop to think about why they're doing the things they do.
They just do it.
They're just, this is the way we do it. And this is the way you're professional. This is how you're supposed to do things. Why? So where does it come from?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Because that's the way you do it. Why is it the way we do it? Because
it is.
An
article,
circular logic.
There's a thought piece years ago, and I don't remember who it was written by, and I should. That was written by a Black queer person who talked about professionalism as white supremacy. And it's not just talking about like hairstyle, policing, and things like that, or clothing. It's like literally when we're saying professional is I can do my job, right? That is professional. I can do my profession. But you're actually putting all of these other social expectations on it that are based on essentially what makes someone from majority culture, majority like non-autistic, like an holistic person comfortable. That is the definition of professionalism, everyone constantly feels stressed to not fail this version of professionalism.
Well, and nobody actually truly fits into it either.
Nobody. And then we police each other.
Yes.
And so if workplaces, and I do want to start making some content about this, even though I don't consider myself like a content creator, but like
you're more of a content creator than we are. Than I am, because he makes most of it.
I mean, wait until there's like people who use burner accounts to look up to creep on your content and then make like videos about you, even though like
I can't wait, because then I can give them the kind of shit I think people should give us for our videos.
Okay.
I'm always like, if you hate me, why are you I live rent free in your head. Like, you love me more than my exes.
I've started to.
I'm with you on that one.
I've started to open my mouth more because I'm trying to, like I mentioned before, that I thought like part of my younger self is kind of dead, but like I've been trying to be more vocal about my thoughts and feelings about things, which is why I've been making more content lately. I'm like, I have a feeling, I have a thought. Instead of just keeping it to myself, I've been sharing it. Mm-hmm. And my hopes is like by sharing it, I'm like, maybe other people will relate to this.
That's a congratulations moment.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's what I think when I post stuff on TikTok. Like I'm not posting stuff because I think that I know better than anyone else. It's, hey, I feel this way. Does anyone else relate? Or this is what annoys me about things that we do to each other, or I think there's harm there, like with us beating each other up all the time.
I get it. You know what you said at the very beginning, both of you, I think, were like, I'm not an expert, I'm learning.
Right.
I say that all the time. And then I get accused of like being an expert. I'm like, I don't identify as an expert. That is so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're projecting that onto somebody else.
I'm like, I'm a lifelong learner, man. There's things I know. And then I'm always like, hey, if I said something wrong, like you tell me. What I will not do is validate people who live in a delusional reality different than the one I live in. That's not my job. That's what your journal is for. That's what your therapist is for. That's what your mom is for. It's what your bestie is for.
That's right.
That's not my job.
Yeah,
that's not my job. So that's sorry. Right. If you disagree with me, and I think the book Conflict is Not Abuse, I think should be like required reading, because we have no tolerance for conflict and we immediately assume that it's abuse. And again, this happens in the workplace, but also in social spaces. Yeah. I'm like, conflict is just, we don't agree. We're having a disagreement.
That's all. It doesn't have to be more than that. It doesn't have to be a fight.
And I think conflict, and maybe because I don't know if it's my upbringing, my trauma, or my career. Conflict
it's just because you're Eastern European.
I think we're very, very confrontational.
I was kidding.
No, I agree. Is my background considered Eastern European?
No, you'd be Northern European. He's like Swedish.
Yeah. All my family's from Sweden, so
not as confrontational.
I think there's
because it's too cold. There's a funny
there's a funny dynamic between, like, you think of the Vikings who like who went around pillaging and like doing all these horrible things.
They actually didn't. We have a whole. We've been
because they also didn't call themselves Vikings. Viking is actually an activity. It's not actually.
All right, well, that ruins my joke. Not my joke, but
they played instruments. They drank tea. Like it's a whole thing. They were actually
there's so much more to it.
Well, all the joke I was going to point out is it's funny because you picture a Viking as like these marauders and stuff, and then you have like modern Swedish people who are like very like docile, passive, happy people. It's like, I don't know. It's just funny to me.
It's easy to be docile, passive when you only have sun for how many hours of the day ever, and also all of your neighbors look
we don't
like
want to hate anyone. We just want to make
the homogeny of it. Yes,
it's incredible homogenous culture, so they never have to feel very uncomfortable.
Right,
we just want to eat our smoked fish and make furniture.
Yes.
Okay, I am not participating in the cultural stereotypes for the internet that wants to cancel me. So
we will.
I'm sorry, Swedish people who are offended by me making IKEA jokes.
But
hey, I love IKEA.
I do love IKEA. It's not a good representation of Swedes in general. But
I know it's not, but it's.
But I love IKEA. I think it's good quality and it's easy for me to put together.
They have great horse meatballs too. It's great.
They're wonderful tasting. Okay. By the way, that is all a true statement. I actually go to IKEA once a week just to walk around the building.
Is everything okay?
Well, yeah, I just got a message about D&D being later today, and I'm just processing.
Wait. Okay, we need to pause all this social justice stuff real quick. You played D&D?
Yes.
How long have you been playing D&D for?
Oh, I'm a newbie. It's only a year and a half.
Oh, okay, rock and roll. What edition are you guys playing with?
I think it's 5th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I started when it was called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which, if I remember correctly, is edition 2. I started playing in the late 80s, so I don't play anymore. But like I used to play.
I'm a later in life, like out as nerd because. Yeah.
Hey, what happened to? How come nerd is now a label for people in like that kind of way of like? Because I've heard and seen quite a few people like, well, I'm just now coming out as a nerd. I'm like, the fuck? That used to be a term that just basically said you dug things that most other people don't. You know what I mean? Like, you're a science
pejorative, and people used it as kind of like a
derogatory term.
Yeah. It used to be a derogatory term, but I mean, some of us kind of owned it. But now
I think a big thing that happened was like, people that used to hate on comic book folks now were like enjoying the mega million machine that is the MCU, which is different than Marvel.
Nerd culture became cool. Like Star Wars and when Marvel and all that stuff became cool. Video games became cool.
When Henry Cavill came out and said, I play Warhammer 40K, nerd culture kind of that became the forefront.
I mean, like I was like, if Henry Cavill is doing anything there, then we've reached peak. I think
and he played things like The Witcher too.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, It's not Jason Momoa. Who's the guy? The guy that's married to Sofia Vergara. Big guy. I forget. He's like a mega nerd in Hollywood. So like anyway, I think there's
Joe Manganiello?
Yeah, him.
Yeah. Wait, he's married to Sofia Vergara?
Oui.
Oh my God. They're both really good actors, and it's like, holy crap, they're that high level of actors and celebrities, but yet they got together. I think it's very fascinating.
Two people that are that heteronormatively attractive getting together should be illegal. Just straight up.
They're both
Brad and Angelina.
They're both too good looking.
They're gorgeous people.
They should cancel out. They should.
They're both gorgeous people. But they're also. But I think it's also really, really cool that Joe Manganiello, from even the very beginning of being in Hollywood, when he wasn't a really high known celebrity, when he was doing like True Blood, he was still talking about playing D&D, reading comic books. He was still talking about that stuff. It was
you and I need to talk True Blood. I don't have enough people in my life.
I can talk some True Blood. Yes, I can.
My whole D&D character is based on True Blood.
Really?
Yes.
Awesome.
So,
awesome.
Oh my God.
I can definitely talk some True Blood.
I love that this has been an absolute, like, what's it called? Cornucopia of everything under the sun. Yeah.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
We don't know how to stay on topic.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
I don't know what was useful about it, but I did really, really, really deeply enjoy this conversation. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. So, yeah, that would be the cue to start rounding out. So, with that being said, God, I'm really bad at these segues, aren't I? All right, I'm going to work on it. I'm real bad at segues. All right. If I did a stand-up show, it would be like one topic, pause for 3 seconds, go into the next topic. I would have no segue whatsoever. Anyway, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening so far. Mosh, thank you for coming on our show. I really appreciate meeting one of the last people born in the USSR. It was really nice. I really appreciate what you do. Everybody go on the ticker top.
Well, I mean, you guys shouldn't be mad at Putin then. He's trying to bring it back.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh, wow. You just got to look like you going to get murdered in your sleep. All right. Yeah, we are. You know what? We're all allowed to say some stupid shit. Did I tell you
my grandma was a corporal in the KGB, and what her specialty was information gathering?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was going to make a KGB joke too, but I'm
making it for you so you don't get as much hate. But her specialty is information gathering, which I don't know if you could translate and read between the lines of what that means.
I actually know. No, I
torture.
Cannot. Oh,
yeah.
So Grammy was good at making people feel bad.
Is your Grammy going to waterboard me?
Yeah. I get it honest.
So thank you very much for listening. We just learned one more important fact about Mosh's family, which
if you see me covered in water, struggling to breathe later, you know why.
That's exactly why. Yeah, it'll be Grammy coming to say hello. All right. So again, if you like, dislike, agree, disagree, if you find us offensive, if you don't find us offensive, if you want to tell us I'm wrong, we're wrong or we're right, please drop a message. Tell us on some social media site. And if you'd like to be a guest on our show, please let us know as well. We're willing to talk to anybody and everybody. And if you don't look like me and Steve, even better. So thank you very much. Please enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.